Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on social media at GatorDave_SEC. And joining me is Will Miles at Will Miles SEC from Read and Reaction. And of course, we're coming to talk about it. Not much of a surprise if you were following along pretty much all week, and especially after the way the Gators looked on Saturday, that Florida is firing Billy Napier after a 3-4 start to the 2025 season. Will, here we are. So many expectations on this season. There was a lot riding on this season, and it didn't start off the way we wanted it to. And Florida gets about halfway through the season, and off of a win, will fire Billy Napier. So still waiting on official confirmation from Florida, of course, but all the sources out there, Football Scoop, On3, ESPN, all the Pete's out there, of course, are confirming it there. We can confirm it on our end too, but Will, here we are. We don't want to be here. We want to hire a coach who's going to be here 10, 15, 20 years and win a lot of football games. But here we are. The best move right now is to make a move with Billy Napier. Let's move forward, get the next guy in. We will spend this episode kind of, of course, why this happened, reliving the Billy Napier tenure. We will throw a hot board out at the end as well. But, Will, here we are on this Sunday, Florida moving on from Billy Napier.
Yeah, I mean, look, I started covering the Gators back in like 2015, 2016 time frame. Started coming on Gators Breakdown 2017. So it does feel like we're going through a revolving door of coaches, and Billy Napier is just the latest in that line. But the Napier era, at least from wins and losses, has been significantly worse than the guys before him, right? It's not just that this is like a continuation of Florida not being amongst the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world. This is like Florida dropping down into the Vanderbilts and the Kentuckys, and as we saw the other day, the Mississippi States of the world. And so this isn't just about like getting back to the top. This is in many ways about arresting the fall, right? That there are ramifications for being a team that, has the ability to go 3-9 or 4-8, to consistently be 6-6 in that sort of range. Like, I had somebody coming after me on X the other day or yesterday during the game about like, we'll never recover from letting go of Napier. And I'm like, oh no, however will we recover from the 6-win seasons? Like that'll be terrible. So, look, I mean, everybody seems to love Billy Napier. That's great. I like a lot of people who are bad at their jobs, and I mean, and Billy Napier is not a bad head coach. At Louisiana, he was successful, right? Successful enough to parlay that into a contract at Florida that has no offset language, which means he's going to be making $20 million no matter what he does the next few years. So I mean, I don't feel sorry for Billy Napier. We tried, it didn't work out. The people I feel sorry for are all the staff, the support people, the people who are making, $80, $120, $150,000 a year and have to get up and find a new place and move their families and that sort of stuff. That's obviously difficult, but this is part of what this job comes with, right? I mean, you don't sign 14-year contracts when you become the head coach of these places. They all have buyouts negotiated for a reason, right? The reason buyouts are laid out in the contract is because everyone understands that if things don't go well, you have to have rules around how do you separate. And so Florida and Napier had those rules negotiated. Florida decides to execute the contract. And I think given what we've seen from wins and losses on the field, that's a fair thing to do at this point. I think, 45 games into the Billy Napier era, we can be pretty sure that there's not this turnaround on the horizon that, he sort of got away from the hot seat after last year with the streak at the end to a point where if Florida had just been like competent to start this year, like we wouldn't be having this discussion. No. The problem is that Florida came out and was just putrid, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And, I wrote in my post-game article, it'll release tomorrow on Read and Reaction, the website, but it released today for my Patreon, that this was really a perfect ending for Napier. Like that game yesterday against Mississippi State was the Napieriest of Napier wins. Just like, they fall behind 7-0 on the opening drive. You've got 2 drops in the end zone for the Gators on their opening drive, so they have to settle for a field goal. They ran a quarterback draw on 3rd and 7 to settle for a field goal, and on top of that, have a delay of game and an illegal hands to the face penalty. And so it ends up being a 54-yard attempt, even though it was a chip shot. They had a slow-moving drive at the end of the half that you have the interception by Lagway. They score a touchdown to go up 19-7, have 12 men on the field, so they can't go for 2. They take a sack on 3rd and 1 with 1:38 left to give Mississippi State another chance.
You can go for 2 there.
I mean, you can, sure.
You should have. But.
Oh, come on. Florida's going to gain 7 yards, and then they would have run a quarterback draw.
But it's a 1 to 2 point difference. It doesn't matter.
They would have run a quarterback draw, Dave. Like 3rd and 7. We got to get better position for the next play. I don't know. I go back and I just say they averaged 6.6 yards per play yesterday, which is like top 15 offense category. Scored 23 points. Like, if there's anything that describes the Billy Napier era, it's that the offense moved the ball up and down the field and they still didn't score. And it's like, so whether the offense was anemic and couldn't move the ball, whether the offense moved the ball all over the place, like it just didn't seem to matter. Florida was going to come out there and put up 23 or 24 points. And, you know, in our preseason magazine, Nick and I talked about that it's a big jump from 8-5 to 11-1. And the jump really comes on the offensive side of the ball. You got to start averaging 34, 35, 36 points per game. And no Billy Napier offense at Florida has ever done that. And without that, I think, without that kind of jump, and they didn't get it this year, they were definitely going to struggle.
Yep. So, all right, we'll go through it all right here. Billy Napier's tenure at Florida. What might be next here? So everybody hit that like button. I know a lot of you watching right now. Thank you so much for checking Will and I out here. I know probably every Gator podcast is going live, about to go live. I don't know, but right now we're worried about Gators Breakdown. But thank you guys for spending it with us, whether you're doing it live or you watching the replay. And then if you want even more interaction, be sure to join Gators Breakdown Plus. Link is in the description. GatorsBreakdownPlus.com. The Discord is on fire right now with the news of Billy Napier being let go at Florida. So a bit of news here before we get into it all, Will. Billy Gonzalez will be the interim for the Gators. So, hey, something I called for actually happened here now. Maybe it would have been Jabbar Jaluk if it wasn't for the LSU incident, but I was just like, well, since that happened, Billy G should be the guy. Been around the program long enough. And, you know, through Meyer, through Mullen, now with Napier, certainly somebody who has just been around the program, knows what we're doing here, what we're about here. And I just think it's a good move here, putting him in the interim. So I like that. Good move for me as far as that one goes. So let's get into it, Will. I mean, look, it's the way I've explained this whole thing about, we talk about the rotation of coaches at Florida. It's a hiring problem, not a firing problem. You keep cycling through till you get the guy. So Florida had, of course, fires Billy Napier 3-4 to start the 2025 season. And look, this was the 2025 season that was supposed to show that this embattled head coach was able to get Florida on track. It never happened. And after another terrible start to another season, Billy Napier is gone after beating Mississippi State on Saturday. So you'll never convince me that it's a firing problem and not a hiring problem. Yes, it has been a while since Florida could, or Florida has stability on the sidelines, but stability for the sake of stability is not a great route. And with Napier, enough resources, enough patience were given, of course, in a time where stability is supposed to help in college football. He could not take advantage of that. So the very first comment, Will, when we got in here was, why did Florida fire Napier? I mean, I think the writing's on the wall of why, but we'll go through it in this episode here. But Florida was fair to Napier, and it was fair to Will Muschamp. It was fair to Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen. Short windows of success for those coaches, but nothing sustainable. Each of those coaches given ample opportunity to make Florida a contender and failed. Napier was given more than all of those guys. It was paid very well for a coach coming from the Sun Belt. As you mentioned, buyout, approximately $21 million to be paid in installments of 50% of the money within 30 days of separation, and then equal payments of 12.5% over the next 4 years. So, look, Scott Strickland gave a terrible deal from the Florida side there, but Florida gave him the ability to hire this army of a staff, allowed him to build out his staff as he sees fit, had a brand new facility to work with, had all the resources where previous coaches thought they lacked, but where Billy Napier lacked the most was on the sideline on game days. So you brought it up, Will. Over 45 games, 22 wins, unacceptable here. His record stands in the SEC at 12-16, 3-12 against the primary rivals with Florida. The only wins coming against Tennessee in his second season, wins over LSU and FSU last season. Never beat Georgia. Crushed both times he played against Miami when Mario Cristobal was brought into the same season. Florida was 5-17 versus ranked opponents under Napier. Never won a single road game against a ranked team. Never beat a team on the road that finished the season with a winning record. Napier was given everything needed to succeed. Got a 6-year deal with $42 million there when he accepted the Florida job. So, I mean, he's had the resources, Will. There's no excuse why this didn't work besides the game day operation there under Billy Napier. So I think the administration showed patience. The fan base showed patience. There were plenty of opportunities given. So he had the advantages, but the results didn't materialize where it mattered most. And of course, that is the win column. So Will, to his credit, players largely stayed out of trouble, pretty active in the community. I mean, you had we could talk about Billy Napier personally. We know that. This is all about Billy Napier, the coach. That's why he's fired. He probably got a leash because of the good person that he was. and Scott Strickland hanging on in that regard. But then there were some incidents that kind of happened throughout the tenure. Of course, college football was changing with portal and the NIL. I think Napier was very receptive of NIL, but not necessarily the transfer portal. He stuck to his guns of trying to build Florida mostly through high school recruiting and not be so reliant on the transfer portal. And recruiting was never elite. I wanted him to use the portal more early on and build some early wins and build some momentum to take on the recruiting trail. That didn't happen. He chose another route, and that was, to come with a slower build. And many wanted to fall back on that Napier line from his opening press conference that fans would be frustrated and to trust the process. But fine. Well, it means results needed to come eventually. We circled this year for it. It didn't happen. The process was supposed to pay off, and it didn't. We were asked to wait. We did. Nothing happened. Look, I don't fault Napier in every angle here as far as that one goes. I was willing to let it play out. There was a lot to figure out in this ever-changing world of college football. So I questioned if the route would work. Was even sold on it in some ways, but I think there was an absolute right to question, given the results, how much other teams, they came out of nowhere. They started winning in the landscape of college football. Those had less sources, a different plan, and it worked. So I think when you look around the landscape, how it worked out, what he dealt with, the resources given, the route he chose, we'll get into more of it too, play calling, starting off with poor defenses, special teams. It took a while to come around on things, but I don't think anybody should feel sorry for the coach. I can feel sorry for the person. I mean, he's getting a nice payday out of this, but it was earned. Him getting fired midway through year 4, it was earned. There was plenty of patience involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we should say is that Billy Napier earned the Florida head coaching job in the first place. His resume at Louisiana made me excited about what he was going to potentially be able to do at Florida. When I looked at that resume, it was a guy who had raised the level of recruiting at Louisiana. It was a guy who had started out, I think, 7-7 in his first year and then had gotten to a point where he was winning conference championships. Like, it was something where you said, hey, look, this is worth a shot to bring somebody in. Now, you can quibble about the contract that Scott Strickland gave him and the guarantees that are there, the offset language and all that sort of stuff. But in many ways, some of those things were probably put in place to try to tamp down some of the speculation that would go on with a coach. I mean, Florida obviously doesn't want to have turnover just like anybody else. But here's what if I go back and look at the list of guys who were hired around the same time as Billy Napier, you got Napier won 48.9% of his games at Florida. You got Brent Venables won 61% of his games at Oklahoma. Mario Cristobal, 61% of his games at Miami. Lincoln Riley, 66% of his games at USC. So the first thing that tells you is even when you think you have a sure thing, right? I mean, Miami plucked Cristobal from Oregon thinking he was going to be a sure thing. USC plucked Riley from Oklahoma thinking he was going to be a sure thing. You don't necessarily get a sure thing even if you think you've got one. And then, if you keep going up that list, you got Brian Kelly at LSU. He's won 72% of his games. Again, that's one of those where I think LSU was sitting there crowing about who they got in that cycle, stealing him away from Notre Dame. Then you got Marcus Freeman, won 76% of his games, and Dan Lanning, who's won 85% of his games at Oregon. And so if you're going to tell me that turnover is like the death of a program, well, Dan Lanning's won 85% of his games at Oregon, and that Oregon team had 1 year of Cristobal or 2 years of Cristobal before Lanning came in and was terrible before Cristobal got there, right? So like that wasn't like the Chip Kelly Ducks that Dan Lanning took over after like 18 years of stability. And quite honestly, every program that we see with stability, the next guy usually struggles, right? I mean, Spurrier leaves, you've got Urban Meyer, or you've got, Spurrier leaves, you've got Ron Zook as the next guy in there. Meyer leaves, you've got Muschamp as the next guy in there, and sort of this cascading group of guys that we've had at Florida. Even Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma, now you've got Venables on the back end, not quite as good as Lincoln Riley. So this idea that you're going to have like 18 years of continuity is what you need before you make a change. It's like, no, some of these guys are really good. And some of these guys are above average, and some of these guys aren't great. And Napier, when it comes to his on-field coaching and the results that he gets, or has gotten, at least at Florida, once he got to the big time, is on that list of guys that you just go, yeah, like he's not going to get another big-time job at a big-time conference anytime soon. He'll have to rehabilitate his image quite a bit. And I think even if he did get another opportunity to go into a place, they're going to make him like, there's going to be like offensive coordinator guarantees and all that sort of stuff to go along with that sort of thing. And look, you're not going to get me to defend this decision. This is one that I think we all thought was going to come after Texas A&M last year. And, I can remember coming on here and going after the vote of confidence going, I don't like it, but I'll keep analyzing it. And then, of course, they have the run at the end of last year, so that gets me excited about what might happen this year, which only really makes me more disappointed in everything that happened this year, because I actually did come into this year optimistic about what Florida might be able to do after what I saw last year, because I did think that they had a quarterback who was going to be able to offset some of the deficiencies in the roster. And then to see that quarterback turn into Graham Mertz is, or worse than Mertz really, is just not, it's really disheartening because of everything that we thought he could have done. So, look, DJ Lagway was always the hope for this program. Having that guy in the program was the thing that made us say, yeah, okay, this is why you're patient. And seeing Lagway struggle means there's just no hope left. And, as a head coach in a major college program, vision-wise, you sell wins and you sell hope. And neither one of those exists anymore, and that's why Billy Napier's no longer the head coach.
Okay, talking about that, we do have official word from Florida now. So the message from Athletic Director Scott Strickland: Florida announces change in football leadership. The statement from Athletic Director Scott Strickland says, "Today I met with Coach Napier and informed him that a change in leadership of our football program would best serve the interest of the University of Florida. On behalf of Gator Nation, I want to sincerely thank Billy and his family for their tireless commitment to the Florida Gators. Billy built a tremendous culture of accountability and growth among the young men he led each day. His organized and detailed approach had a meaningful impact across all levels of our program. As Coach Napier has often said, this is a results-driven business, and while his influence was positive, it ultimately did not translate into the level of success we expect on the field. I have named Billy Gonzalez as interim head coach. Coach Gonzalez has been a valued member of our program for many years, including being a part of multiple championship teams. He is a Gator through and through. His deep understanding of our culture, our student athletes, and what it means to represent the University of Florida makes him well suited to lead our team. Making this decision during the open date provides our team valuable time to regroup, refocus, and prepare for the challenges ahead. The timing also allows us to conduct a thoughtful, thorough, and well-informed search for our next head coach. We remain fully committed to utilizing every resource available to identify the right leader to guide Gators football into the future. I will conduct the search with a high degree of confidentiality to protect the privacy of those involved. The search will focus on the hiring of an elite football coach who will embody the standard we have set at the University of Florida, and we will continue to provide all of the necessary resources for that coach, his staff, and the players to be successful. Anytime you conduct a head coaching search, especially for a high-profile sport like football or men's basketball, you learn something. The lessons from past experiences will guide us through the work ahead. Across the University of Florida, there is an unwavering and uncompromising commitment to being the best in everything we do. This includes our athletic department, as evidenced by the fact UF is the only school in the country to win 3 national championships in both football and men's basketball. The standards and expectations for Gators football are to win championships, not simply to compete. We exist to win and will not settle for less. UF has never been more invested in the success of this football program, elite facilities, robust NIL opportunities, and comprehensive support for our student athletes and staff than we are today. The University of Florida is a destination, a place where people come to achieve excellence. With our resources, passionate fan base, and unwavering commitment, we are determined to return Gators football to championship form. I understand and accept the responsibility to deliver a football program that reflects the greatness of this university, and I thank Gator Nation for their continued support as we begin this next chapter together. Well written.
Sounds like Scott Strickland needs to hire an offensive coordinator. Like, we've been sitting here telling Billy he needs to hire an offensive coordinator for 4 years now. And Strickland just gets to keep conducting these detailed and confidential searches for head coaches. Gonna have to hit on this one. Most athletic directors don't get 3 shots.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see, one, whether the fan base is pleased with who ends up being the guy. And 2, I think there really is the part where he basically says competing isn't enough. We want to win and win championships.
Yep.
There have been accusations by many folks in the media, the accusations by many fans, that the University Athletic Association, that the athletic department is fine and happy cashing checks, not necessarily winning championships. And so it's going to be time, right? You write a statement like that, you're saying we're getting into a bidding war, right? And I remember I wrote something years ago when Billy Napier said we're not getting into bidding wars, saying like that's setting an interesting strategic vision if you're trying to fundraise, right? And Billy Napier, Scott Strickland just set a strategic vision, which is we're getting in a bidding war. We're going to win on the field, but that also probably means that you're going to win in terms of going after your top candidate. And so, Penn State's out there, Florida's out there. There might be some others coming. And
where in this text is spot the ball? Spot the contract? Is that where we're going with this?
I mean, Lane Kiffin's used spot the ball a couple of times over the past few weeks. So he either enjoys trolling us or there's significant interest there. So we'll see what happens.
And this is a good time to get into this comment, so I'm glad I saw it at this time. Alpha Gator USA, off of that statement by Scott Strickland, off of what Will just brought up, Alpha Gator USA says, before we get too excited, Dave, can you tell us about what looks to be movement with UAA and how that may impact the coaching search? Plenty of conversations the last 2 days, guys. And I'll be up front with you. There's going to be movement in the UAA. I think we've already seen it with the Chip Howard retirement. So there you go with that. I'll leave it at that. I don't think they're done. I don't know how much will be actually announced. But in many conversations that I had the last couple of days in Gainesville is, they're not standing by. Hopefully change. This opened up a lot of people's eyes. And that's why I want to go back to one of the comments here, Will, about the where did he say it? About conducting. Oh, yeah. Anytime you conduct a head coaching search, especially for a high-profile sport like football or men's basketball, you learn something. The lessons from past experiences will guide us through the work ahead. Okay. Well, that means don't just go interview one guy and be done with it, because from all the reports, that's what we were told Scott Strickland was sold on Billy Napier. Billy Napier was the guy, and that was it. So Scott's going to, help lead this search, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I'd expect more than one candidate to be interested, and for Florida to gauge the interest and do their due diligence and do their research for the best fit for the University of Florida moving forward. So there we go. Well, I mentioned it, so since we just talked about it there too, any thoughts of Billy Gonzalez being the interim? I talked about it last night. I was like, it's got to be him or Jaluk. From what I've heard, Ron Roberts doesn't really want it. It wasn't going to be Russ Callaway. It wasn't going to be anybody. Only other person I thought of would be Mike Peterson, just because he's an alum, and we've seen that play out at other schools before in this situation. It was either going to be Jaluk Gonzalez or maybe Mike Pete, further down the list for me. But with Jaluk just coming off suspension, what happened against LSU, it made the most sense of it being Billy Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that Billy Gonzalez is not a Billy Napier disciple, right? Like from the standpoint of like, if you're trying to separate yourself from that regime, and granted, the coaching staff that's all going to stay and finish out the year is they were all hired by Napier, so they have some of that associated with them. But Gonzalez has been a through line in the Florida program far longer than that, right? And so, it's not just, this is one of Napier's minions who's taken over if we screw up and have 12 guys on the field again. At that point, no, it's up to Billy Gonzalez to take care of that. And the heat ends up on him, I guess, for that. But, look, the reality is that people are on here in the comments already throwing out every single replacement that they can possibly think of. Like, the interim coach is an interim coach, right? Like, you can do something for yourself as an interim coach. Like, if you come in and make changes and you learn about, like, and you've thought that things could be different, and, things turn around and Florida starts to look different, maybe Billy Gonzalez gets a look someplace, as a head coach or something with more than just wide receiver coach associated with it, maybe a lower level school. But, other than that, it's just who can bring stability to the program, who do the kids trust, and then who's got the ear of the people in the administration, so that the search that they're doing isn't some giant distraction, right? Because you would think a lot of these guys, they still have jobs to do, but they also have to look at where are they going next, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the phone calls that they're making aren't necessarily going to be to the recruits. The phone calls they're going to be making are going to be to, does Alabama have an analyst job open? Who's going to have a wide receiver coach job available? Who's going to have a linebacker coach available? Like those things are all going to start moving, because college football, just because the way it's set up, you kind of have to have your staff in place by like December. Right. And so December, there's still games going on. Sometimes you got to figure out how to find a soft place to land. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much.
Right.
But I think having a guy who's got a through line at Florida probably makes the most sense. And, I think more than anything, there's value because it's not just the one game in the bowl game. Like, Charlie Strong would get that one game in the bowl game when someone would leave. DJ Durkin got the one game in the bowl game. Like, you get that sort of stuff. You don't really learn anything. Greg Knox got it one time or maybe twice. You don't necessarily get a whole lot out of that. But, I mean, you got the Georgia game, right? Like, if the team comes out, they're completely hyped. The offense looks good. Lagway looks dynamite. People have to look at Billy Gonzalez and go, at least he's not going to get in the way. Right. Like he might, like maybe he's not a miracle worker, but then the question is, was Napier actively getting in the way of these guys taking a step forward? And I think that ends up being a feather in the cap for Billy Gonzalez if he can get that done.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've seen teams from around the country now be able to do this interim thing this year and go have success. I mean, I don't know, not many people probably watched it, but UAB was another example. Fired Trent Dilfer, hired interim. They beat undefeated Memphis yesterday. And we've seen what UCLA has been able to do since. So it's been a move that has paid off in some ways for teams this year. So, well, I've been kind of just going back to the Napier thing, why this move been made. Of course, the overall record, and we dive into it some more. Refusing to give up play calling and the changing aspects of or changing aspects of the offense. Started off poor defense for the first couple of years. Special teams coordination was terrible, the first couple of seasons. go back to it too. I was talking about the incidents earlier, and you had everything going on with the Gator Collective and Darren Heitner and then the Jaden Rashada fiasco. And like, I don't know how much you put on Billy Napier there, but that's just one of the things that, came up under his tenure here. And then this year, maybe when it looked like things were kind of unraveling, fighting and spitting on players. And that comes from, some coaches like Jabbar Luke as well, who was suspended for 3 games this year for putting his hands on the LSU player. Just certain things did look like they were unraveling in 2025. But, there were aspects to like off the field. I do like Billy Napier, the person. He did bring in good talent that should have been coached to be being more competitive this year. That's part of why he doesn't have the job now. He brought in enough talent for Florida to be better than the record indicates, and I hope Florida keeps the GatorMate program that he unearthed under his tenure here. That's big kudos for me, right? What he's doing with student athletes there. But there were just aspects off the field that you would hope would translate on the field, and it never happened. But like I said, you go back to it all, and that's what the patience was supposed to be about, and the consistency that never really showed up. I mean, the stability that was supposed to be the payoff in 2025. It was supposed to be roster stability and coaching stability and play calling stability, and just none of that stuff happened. Just the good things that were supposed to translate, that he was supposed to put together Sunday through Friday, didn't show up on Saturdays.
I mean, so Billy Napier built the Louisiana program in the SEC. And I think those are fundamentally different jobs. So I wrote this a couple of years ago. It was actually when the Rashada stuff was going on. And I will go back to this over and over and over again when I'm talking about Billy Napier and the failures at Florida. I think it's a failure in strategic vision. So when you look at overall, what do you need to do when you're in the MAC or when you're in the Sun Belt? The expectation is you win more than you lose, go into a bowl. You're going to leave if you win a conference championship, but you remember the community. You're not really a mercenary. You gain standing in the program when you turn down that Auburn job, stay with what you built. Until, the Louisiana folks were like happy for Napier when he got the Florida job. Until he started taking players and staff members, and they kind of turned on him. But really, large scale success gets rewarded, but just maintaining positive results builds credibility. That is a Group of 5 Sun Belt MAC job, right? Blue blood is you're a mercenary. If you do the job, you will be lionized, but if you don't, you'll be fired just as fast. And you have 3, maybe 4 years to succeed. Your fan base has expectations of winning, even if it hasn't happened in a long time. The ridiculous memes like Bo Pelini at Nebraska really only go very far if you get stuck at 9-4 and 10-3, let alone 5-7 and 6-6. And the risk to you crashing and burning is really small, right? You've got this giant multi-year contract out there with the buyout, and you're going to have coordinator or media jobs or all that sort of stuff. So to me, the vision should have been high risk, high turnover. Let's bring in our guys right away. Let's take our lumps in year 1 and year 2 as we're starting to build this thing, but let's go balls to the wall with NIL. We talked about getting edges, and honestly, that's the other thing that I'll probably think about when I think about Billy Napier is where was a strategic edge that Florida got in his entire tenure, right? Like Florida was not a dominant factor in NIL under Napier. Like I think they participated in NIL, but I mean, the Rashada thing in itself is like the biggest black eye in the NIL era in college football. And Billy Napier, whether you want to blame him or not, was there and oversaw it, right? So a lack of organization or a lack of understanding or a lack of vision sort of leads to that incident. They were not like dominant players when it came to the transfer portal. In fact, that was Lane Kiffin. Kiffin was the one tweeting out adapt or die after the first big transfer portal year, where Ole Miss just like raided the portal before early signing day, because they recognized that prices in the portal were going to be less than prices on signing day. And they decided to go after it and really try to stack the cupboard there at Ole Miss with transfers. You can argue whether that's worked or not, but they were on the leading edge. Florida was not. When it comes to offense, was Florida on the leading edge of offensive production? No. Billy Napier runs an offense that, if we look at the overall numbers as pedestrian, if we look at the play calling and the play sequencing as relatively pedestrian, there's nothing that offense does that is unique or differentiated or gives them an edge. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, and they've cycled through defensive coordinators. And are they doing anything really unique on that side? No, they're kind of playing bend but don't break, just enough to like keep them in the games. The defense has played better this year, but the first 2 years was just terrible. Special teams, no differentiation there, right? I mean, 12 men on the field, 2 jerseys at one point, like they weren't really making big plays. I mean, we just had a punt block the other day and a bunch of people almost had an aneurysm because of it. Like, so I look at it and I just go, where is the strategic edge that Florida has when it comes to the on-field product? And I haven't even talked about timeout usage. I haven't talked about the middle 8. I haven't talked about, like sitting on the ball until you got 30 seconds left. I haven't talked about 3rd and 1, never taking a shot, though we did do that yesterday. Like, like they had it there and they just didn't throw the ball. I've been harping all year on 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1. The defense is firing up to stop the run. Do the play action, but at that point you can't just take the sack, right? The ball's got to be out of there. If you're going to call that play, you got to be ready to throw it when it opens up, and they didn't do that either. So, I mean, again, I'd love to defend him, but I know there's nothing there, right? It's just it is what it is.
Yeah, and let's go to the main part of it: his refusal to open up the offense, or even having the ability to, when he should have had the ability to. And look, some of this I know we've already talked about and stuff, but now we get this kind of encapsulated all here. And when you look at that and everything else that goes along with the offense, 2 offensive line coaches, a lot of resources put there, but not in recruiting and development there. Florida decided not to get in those bidding wars with, look, they would spend money at quarterback, they would spend money at wide receiver, but not change the offense to fit those positions. The offense will still fit around offensive lineman development and running back. Well, running back, you can, I think, scout there, and Florida did a great job at that with Jabbar Juluk and Billy Napier. But the offensive, 2 offensive line coaches, at the time when that was announced, you did have a limit on how many on-field coaches you could have. Florida decided to put 2 on the, offensive line, spending a lot of resources there, but not in the recruiting and the development part of it. And so that was crazy when you saw what Miami's been able to do with their offensive line. And I mean, look, I know you can still take your shots at Mario Cristobal all you want to, but you're not taking many shots at how they decided to, spend up front and the difference that it has made for their team. But deciding to go that route, and the tight end position being such a focal point in the offense, but never having top players there, recruiting bottom of the barrel to players there. And maybe they thought they could develop and find value at those positions, but offensive line, tight end, for the offense they wanted to run, the recruiting and the development did not show it. And that was the offense you wanted to run. That was the offense you wanted to call, the offense you wanted to be play caller of. And you recruited quarterback well. You recruited receivers very well, and just would not leave the idea that this system you wanted to run would work.
Well, I mean, so I think there are like 9 different issues in what you brought up there. The first one, again, I would say is a strategic vision issue, which is that it became very clear very early on that offensive linemen jump less in the portal than the skill guys, which means you have the ability to get the skill guys in the portal, and that also means there's higher risk that those guys are going to leave in the portal. So guys like ETN transferring to Georgia, that's always a risk. Even if you identify the diamond in the rough at one of those skill positions, those guys tend to move around quite a bit. It also, though, means that when it comes down to Samson Okunlola or Maioga at Miami, like those guys, those 5-star left tackles, like those were guys that you probably had a shot at if the NIL number had been right. And, they weren't able to close the deal on those sorts of guys. And, look, I think there is a reason why quarterback is the number 1 compensated position in the NFL. Then it goes left tackle, then it goes defensive end, and then it's like a tie between the corner and the right tackle, right? So those are the places where folks who have a salary cap have decided to allocate their resources. So if I'm looking strategically at other people who have said, how do I allocate resources in order to win and be successful? You have some choices there. Now, one way that NFL teams get around that is that they draft a quarterback and they've got a cap on the rookies who come in. So if you get a Patrick Mahomes on a really good number when he's a rookie, hey, now you can build around him because you can build depth all around him. But what Florida did, I mean, I'm going to assume, is they spent Mahomes money on DJ Lagway to have him in here, and then didn't have the rest to fill in everything around him. And it's great that they got Dallas Wilson. It's great that they got VB3. It's great that they've got, some of the, Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks. But fundamentally, and look, I mean, it's unfair for me in hindsight to criticize the offensive line, because I thought they were going to be good coming into this year. Yeah. I thought, given what we saw last year, 4 returning starters, I thought the offensive line was going to be a strength for this team. And we can talk about the 2 offensive line coaches. We can talk about recruiting, talk about all that stuff. But the reality is they just have not been a strength. Mm-hmm. And, you factor that in with the regression of DJ Lagway, and there hasn't been any way to sort of get around the limitations that the teams had overall. And, but but again, I go back to, there are ways to design programs. And this actually is the place where I hope Florida goes when it comes to whoever they decide to bring in. This is not just bringing in a head coach. This is bringing in a philosophy, a vision, and a clearly communicatable plan for how you build a roster. And it's not we aren't going to bid, because that's stupid. If you have an opportunity to bid on somebody who's going to change your program, you do it. But it does mean that, we're not going to pay for the linebacker because we think we can replace that guy with a cheaper option. Or the Denver Broncos were famous for years just bringing a new guy into the Shanahan program every year. And, they had Terrell Davis for a couple years. He gets injured. Then Clinton Porter, they basically cycled through these guys at running back. And when they got to a point where they were like, okay, this guy's going to decline a little bit, they'd trade him off for somebody in a more valuable position. And so I think there's a lot to be said for saying that, look, the X's and O's part is important, but the roster construction part of it becomes just as big, because if you look, all the teams that compete for the playoffs end up winning a couple of close games on the road. But when they're at home, they're 6-0. Right? They're 7-0, right? They don't give up games in their own home field by keeping it closer than it needs to be, by having a complete dud, those sorts of things. Most of the time, teams that are competing for the championships, even if they don't make it, it's because they're beat up and they're on the road and something goofy happens and blah, 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 blah. It's not hanging on for dear life against Texas and Mississippi State at home.
Yeah, well, there we go. I mean, it's just, just explain how we got here. And, we're just where this program has been the last 4 years. And, it's just a great encapsulation here of what we've done the last 40 minutes or so. We might could come back around on it too, but we can get into some future talk a little bit too.
But one of the things I think is worth noting is I watched Vanderbilt yesterday. Mm-hmm. Win that game and against LSU, and obviously my general dislike for Garrett Nussmeier as a player made me happy in that one. But the thing that really struck me, and as I've gone back and read some of the stuff I've written about Napier over the last week or so, is I pointed out a lot in those articles that Vanderbilt actually wrestled with the problem of how to build the program when they brought in Clark Lee, because they hired Barton Simmons as the general manager and director of personnel, and he'd spent decades with Rival and 24/7 and all of their recruiting. So they had somebody who had connectivity within that space, and they brought him in to say, hey, you're going to help build this program. That doesn't mean Lee doesn't set the direction. That doesn't mean that Lee doesn't work very closely with somebody like that. But it means they recognized at the same time that Billy Napier was being brought in, right? They recognized that those two things are completely separate. That what you do on Saturdays on the field in terms of game management, timeout management, play calling, having the right X's and O's is very different than making sure you have the right players. And, we can chalk a lot of that up to bringing in Diego Pavia, right, as a transfer, and he's been very successful and transformed that team. But Pavia by himself is not good enough to be as competitive as they are. They have done a really good job of surrounding Pavia with the right guys in order to then have a program that, quite honestly, given its schedule, might make the playoff. Like Vanderbilt might make the playoff because they got the right guy in the transfer portal at quarterback, and they built the program in the right way around that quarterback. And let's be honest, has a little bit of an easier schedule than some of the other folks in the SEC. But, so the idea that like you can't turn around quickly or the right guy can't turn around, all that sort of stuff, I think is a fool's errand. I think when you get to a point where you don't have hope that the person in charge is going to be able to turn it around, then you're better off making a change than not. And this change may not work out, right?
No,
like this change may not work out, but we know that what we're doing right now isn't going to work out. And so, it's time.
It is time. It is time. No second guessing right here of it not needing to be done right now. After the 2-4 start, of course, it needed to happen. Florida wanted to wait another week, had a bye week. As we were kind of talking about all week, win or lose, it didn't matter. Florida felt the move needed to be made with the bye week coming up. You have to throw the interim in, give them 2 weeks to prepare for Georgia. But that's where we are right now. We can come back a little bit back on Napier too, but there's been so much talk in the comments, and I see it out there as well about who could be next, who's next, and well, I mean, of course, Lane's the name that comes up the most. Lane Kiffin, of course, his name's going to be on the list. It's going to be on every list out there till we hear that he's not going to take the job or take the job. We got the reports that Ole Miss AD was coming out and saying they're trying to work on a new deal and try and get out in front of it on the heels of the Signetti deal at Indiana. So, of course, that's coming into play here. But ESPN put out a list, Will. So I don't necessarily think, by accident, they were getting out in front of it as well. For ESPN to put out a list, they're sitting there waiting for Billy Napier to be let go as well. So they give out 5 candidates for the job. And who's the first name on there? Yes, it is one Ole Miss coach, Lane Kiffin. So he's the closest thing to Spurrier. And look, there was a lot of contributors here. Eli Letterman, Max Olson, and Adam Rittenberg all contributed to this article. Florida Gators fire Billy Napier, top candidates, transfers, and recruits to watch. So it goes pretty deep in here. So look, they just put this together this morning. They've been working on this for quite some time, it sounds like. So the candidates here is first Ole Miss at Lane Kiffin. He's the closest thing to Spurrier, it says, without all the championships, of course, in today's college football. A brash, supremely confident coach whose gift for play calling and quarterback development are undeniable. Kiffin 50 has started to win more notable games in the SEC, taking down Georgia, South Carolina, and others last season. He's 27-6 since the start of the 2023 season. While his biggest accomplishments have come as an assistant coach, he led Florida Atlantic to conference titles and Conference USA titles in 2017, 2019, knows the state and the league well. Kiffin has indicated he might stay at Ole Miss for the long haul, or at least a slightly longer haul, but Florida would be silly not to seriously gauge his interest level. So let's just stay here before we go through a list, Will, because Lane Kiffin is the name that is overwhelmingly the most popular name out there. Whether you do want him or you don't want him, he's the most polarizing name when you start talking about who could be the next head coach of Florida. So I think he's done well at Ole Miss. Not many coaches do well at Ole Miss. People will throw, who has he beat? What has he done? And you go back and look through his career, only 1 year at Tennessee, then goes to USC. They were under the Reggie Bush sanctions while he was there. That didn't work out. Got the rehab stint in Alabama, mentioned right there. Of course, taking Florida Atlantic to new heights. They haven't won before or since Lane Kiffin left the sidelines there in They're in South Florida, and then comes to Ole Miss and starts winning a lot more than they have been. Knows how to use the transfer portal. Would need to recruit at Florida, of course. I think he's smart enough to realize that as well. Certainly has the brash personality that mentioned that kind of is the modern day Steve Spurrier. But Lane Kiffin, the most polarizing name out there.
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's a few things there. Spurrier
Whether it's at Ole Miss or Florida, he's going to be probably a top 3 paid coach.
Yeah. So if you're paying somebody, let's say $15 million a year, is Kiffin the first call or is Saban? I mean, I'm sitting there going, you're talking about commitment to winning. You're talking about championships is the only goal. Like Scott Strickland just said, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And, if you're pushing all your chips into the middle, you want to be sure that you've got the high end covered as well as just the low end, because you don't want to be coming back 3 years from now with the James Franklin discussion of the guy can't win the big game. And I think, again, as we look closer and closer and closer at the Lane Kiffin resume, I think there are going to be times where we go, yeah, those teams he's lost to have significantly more talent. But that does mean that you're still not sure whether when he gets equivalent talent, will he be able to win? That game against Florida last year, the game against Kentucky last year, those were games where Ole Miss had more talent, and certainly more talent that was performing, and yet they lose both of those games, and that's what keeps them out of the playoffs. So I don't think this is something where I'll tell you like 100% this guy's going to win a national championship if you bring him into Florida. I think what you can say is that you will never walk out of a season probably having won less than 9 games. And given where Florida is right now, there's a lot of value in winning 9, 10, potentially 11 games and just having that place filled up in November, because it's been a while since Florida's had the stadium filled up in November, at least filled up with the opportunity to win something other than spoiling somebody else's season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when you go and look at this, especially for Lane Kiffin, there's the fit, and a lot of people just like the fit of Lane Kiffin and how he would just fit in well at Florida because of the opportunities here. But I just think when you're looking in general, for the head coach, the next head coach of Florida, I mean, what are you looking for? I mean, because you always go to the previous coach and say, well, I don't want that. And it's kind of like, all right, we took a left turn here. Let's take a right turn this time. And it's like completely opposite of what the previous head coach did. So that's an interesting way of looking at it. As far as personality goes, you're getting that much different from Lane Kiffin than you are a Billy Napier, somebody who is, an offensive savant, it seems. And you are right to question, his defense and some of the results so far. And, last year being so disappointed in a playoff caliber team, not reaching the ultimate destination. And, Florida was the one who put the wrap on that last year. But he's certainly going to be the most polarizing name out there. And just it's going to be interesting to see what do you hear coming out from the Ole Miss side of things because of what we heard late last week. and all the talk and all of Lane's tweets and all of his, kind of pokes at Florida in some ways of, the whole spot the ball mantra that Billy Napier made kind of popular before the season. And we've heard it from Lane. It's just, he's going to be the most talked about guy till we get a definitive answer if he is or he isn't the guy.
Yeah, well, I'm just reminded of that scene from Bull Durham where he's talking about where Kevin Costner's talking to Tim Robbins' character about having fungus on his shower shoes. And he's like, once you win 20 games in the show, you can have fungus on your shower shoes and people think you're colorful. He's like, until then, it means you're a slob. And so spot the ball is great until you come out of the gate 1-4, right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, spot the ball is a caricature, right? It's you said spot the ball. So Lane Kiffin, whatever he does, like the reason the brashness of Spurrier bothered everybody outside of Florida so much is because he could back it up. And not only did he back it up, he backed it up 56-6, right? Like when you go out there and just demolish the opponent, like you can go out and say whatever you want. And, let's be honest, there's probably some Auburn people who are interested in coloring books. But, the thing is like those quips are funny when you're winning. If Steve Spurrier had been going 6-6 and had been talking about Georgia having guys suspended to start the year or not being able to spell citrus with UT, well, now that's more like Eli Drinkwitz sitting there at Missouri, like playing a schedule that's a joke, even though it's in the SEC and still being outside of the playoffs on a fairly regular basis, but still running your mouth. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I at least look at Drinkwitz and go, no, thanks. Like, I'm not sure I want that, even though, from a brashness perspective and even from a accomplishments perspective, like turning Missouri into a consistent winner is not like nothing, right? There've been some guys, Gary Pinkel did some good stuff there, but same sort of thing. So
on him before, but I'll let you wrap it up. ESPN had him next, by the way.
Oh God!
Kiffin almost has to be Florida's top target within the SEC, but Drinkwitz also merits close consideration. Like Spurrier, he's an offensive-minded coach who delivers the goods when behind the microphone and will bring a confident style of play to Gainesville. After a slow start in Columbia, Drinkwitz at 42 has guided Missouri to a Cotton Bowl title and a number 8 finish in 2023, and also has a 27-6 record since the start of the 2023 season. The Arkansas native could have Missouri positioned for its third straight winning season in SEC play. Drinkwitz likes Missouri, which has shown him a stronger commitment over time, but if he wants to win a national championship, he could seek a move to a program like Florida.
Yeah, no thanks. I mean, I get it. I understand why people are excited about
we better be missing on some people before we even get there.
No thanks. He's not second on my list, to put it that way.
Yeah.
I think so. Actually, the thing that I know I'm a contrarian sometimes. I enjoy doing it. Why is nobody on these lists from the NFL? Like, there's nobody.
So they have a list of 5 people ESPN does. I'll just go through the names now.
Go through the names. Let's talk about it.
Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, Rhett Lashley, Jed Fish, Marcus Freeman. That is the 5 names.
Yeah. I understand Kiffin is one. I would throw 2 offensive coordinators in the NFL as 2 and 3. And in fact, I would actually throw one in as 1A because I think he really needs a look. And that's the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. Like, that is the guy that I think Florida could really, really do some good stuff with. Now, I think you'd have to support him with a front office, right? I think you'd have to sort of divide up responsibilities like I talked about with Vanderbilt earlier. But I honestly think that's where college football needs to go anyway. Like, I think the idea that a head coach sits there on National Signing Day talking about the personnel who's recruited, I think is outdated. I think it's the same thing when like the Golden State Warriors, sign Kevin Durant. You've got Bob Myers there talking about it, their general manager, not Steve Kerr, because Steve Kerr had something to do with bringing him in, but Myers is the guy who eventually has to sign the contracts and figure out how everything works and all that sort of stuff. And I think college football is moving towards that same thing. You got to be an economist, or you got to be like a business person to be able to figure out what you're going to have to do and how to find edges on the recruiting trails and how to sign somebody and all that sort of stuff. And I look at Monken and I go, he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for Oklahoma State from 2011 to 2012. So that's Gundy, high-powered offenses there. He takes over as the head coach at Southern Miss from 2013 to 2015, builds them from an also-ran into a team that I think goes 9-4 in the third year, gets Nick Mullen drafted into the NFL. That guy's bounced around the NFL for 7, 8, 9 years now as a solid quarterback. So not only being able to identify a quarterback, but be able to train him to be an NFL level quarterback. Then he goes to Tampa Bay and Cleveland in the NFL. Now look, the Cleveland experience with Freddie Kitchens, not exactly something I'm going to hold against him, because Cleveland is just dysfunctional where quarterbacks go to die. Then he goes to Georgia as the offensive coordinator. And the only time that Kirby Smart has had a championship level offense is when Todd Monken has been the offensive coordinator. Pre-Monken, offense with Jake Fromm, not good enough. Post-Monken, offense now with Gunnar Stockton and Carson Beck, not good enough. With Monken, Stetson Bennett, 2 national championships. Like, that guy, we made fun of him, called him the postman and all that sort of stuff. He turned into one of the best quarterbacks in the country under Todd Monken. Then he goes to the Ravens. And the Ravens, Lamar Jackson already won an MVP. Very, very good player. But he's taken a leap in the last couple of years with under Monken's tutelage, and the Ravens have become a much more dangerous offense and have become, really a constant contender. But this year, the Ravens defense is terrible and Lamar Jackson's hurt. And so, to me, all the stars are aligned to where they won't be in the playoffs. Monken won't be bailing on the team on like a Super Bowl run if Baltimore doesn't make it to the playoffs. You can bring him in December because of that. You get the right people surrounding him, and he's got the pedigree of being able to put the X's and O's to work on the field. Like, I look at that and I go, if you're going to build a team with like an NFL type prototype, go to the pros and get the guys who have actually participated in that environment. You obviously have to spend some, and I don't think he'd cost anywhere near what somebody like Lane Kiffin's going to cost, which means then you can go out and hire a general manager. Honestly, if Florida announced tomorrow that Todd Monken was going to be the head football coach and Theo Epstein was going to be the general manager and they were going to pay Theo Epstein $15 million, I'd go, I'm in. This is different. It's unique, but you are going to find some level of differentiation here. Because one, Theo Epstein's not a loser. He turned the Cubs into a team that won the World Series. And I get that this is ridiculous, and I get that Florida won't do it. But I think you need to think outside the box and try to differentiate. Bringing in Lane Kiffin is what Penn State's trying to do. Bringing in Lane Kiffin is what all these other programs are going to try to do. How do you zag? How do you do something that is differentiated versus everybody else that's out there? And maybe you get more bang for your buck if you bring in an NFL coordinator and then folks to run the front office like an NFL operation, so that you have people who are focused on bringing in the Jimmies and the Joes and people who are focused and really good at the X's and the O's. And all of a sudden we're not calling random timeouts after punts.
There you go. Will and I have discussed that a little bit. So I knew he was going to be throwing out the Todd Monken. So we'll see the comments that come in for that. But
Marcus Freeman's won 76% of his games at Notre Dame. And are you telling me that Notre Dame has less resources than Florida? Now, I think years ago, maybe that was true. Maybe there's some academic stuff there, but let's be honest. If they want to get a kid into there, they can get a kid into there. Yeah. He's got some really bad losses on that resume too, right?
That's where I wanted to go. Before you do go for, because I want you to put this into the equation a little bit. And you brought up Monken, we've talked Kiffin, Drinkwitz, all that. When you're looking at the hire here, people will say, oh, what has this guy done? What has he won? The guys who have won something you are not getting. You're not getting a Ryan Day. You're not, just expanding a little bit. You're not getting Nick Saban's not coming back. There's not many coaches out there do you really want Dabo because he's won something? No, hell you don't. So there's no coaches out there that's going to appease everybody because of their accomplishments on the field. None of those guys are out there that you're going to get.
So why aren't we getting Ryan Day?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I know people will say that. And I think you can't, okay, throw the money at him. If you're going to pay 15, okay, say, all right, well, Ohio State match. If you're serious, maybe you do. Maybe in this new world of college football, maybe that's what you do. I also say you learn from your mistakes. And Scott Strickland said it in that thing is in his press release as well. You really want to go get yourself in another dumb contract? I'm not so sure you do. But, okay, let's be creative here, I guess. If you yeah. I mean, call Ryan Day. I'd be all for it. Offering 15. See if Ohio State will match. If they don't, all right, maybe you got yourself a coach here. But most likely, it's not going to be the path. I don't even know if he'd leave. But you're not going to go out there and get the guy who's won a title. You're not going to get out there a guy who's won a conference title 3 out of 4 years or whoever that might be. There's going to be warts on whoever you want to go get. Whether they have experience, whether they don't have experience, whether they have big wins, whether they don't have big wins. But I get tired of the argument, well, what has he done? What has anybody done out there that's actually attainable for the job?
Well, so the problem I have with all of that is that I don't want a guy who's won a championship in the past. And this actually is the biggest feather in the Lane Kiffin cap for me, is that tweet when the transfer portal really started to get serious, adapt or die, because that is the guy that Florida needs. Florida needs somebody who understands that the job at Florida is not the same as the job at Ole Miss.
Thank you.
That the job at Florida is not the same as the job at Clemson. That the job at Florida is not the same as the job at Georgia. Look, I don't think Florida would be good to go get. I mean, it would make heads explode. But you could make a Godfather offer to Kirby. I don't think Kirby has the same differentiation now that he did 7 or 8 years ago, and he's going to have to adjust or die. And up until now,
how many times have we tried to copy Bama?
Well, again, yes, exactly. Well, I mean, honestly, though, if you look at those staffs, I mean, Kiffin's a Saban disciple, right? Like Kiffin spent time there. So it's not, but the question is, what did he take from Nick Saban? Because one of Nick Saban's biggest accomplishments is that he completely changed the structure of that program about halfway through his tenure, when you could sort of see him kind of a little bit on the downslope. Not, I mean, for Saban, right? A couple of years where he went 10-3, you're watching Jake Coker play quarterback. And like before it crested and started going downhill, he's like, Jalen Hurts. And we're going to bring in linebackers with a lot more athleticism. And
I got beat by Johnny Manziel. That's not happening again. All right, let me go fix my defense.
Yep. And so I think there are, like, the adapt or die component is the thing that we want to make sure that we find in whoever comes in. And so, Urban Meyer, in his tenure at Florida, like, he was such a just pathological crazy person when it came to winning that, he's sitting there going, all right, let's put a fullback in. I don't care. Is that going to help us win? We'll do it. Right. And so the same thing when he went to Ohio State, like, I mean, he won a national championship with a 3rd string quarterback. But at the same time, like, he runs hot, right? That's a guy who, like, is going to, like, there's stuff in both Meyer eras at both of those schools, both Ohio State and Florida, that you're like, am I really proud of my school for that little bit, for that little piece that's going on there? And no, it's because he's crazy, right? But that craziness drives a desire to adapt, because he would rather adapt than lose. And that's the thing I think that folks like Strickland have to make sure that they gather information on is Lane Kiffin coming to Florida and going, hey, I'll rest on what I've done before? Or is Lane Kiffin coming to Florida because he's pathologically driven to win? And because that pathological drive is going to cause him to adapt and change the way he needs to change in order to adapt to the Florida program. And I'd say the same. It's one of the reasons why I like having separate roles for recruiting versus head coaching, is I think that allows you to get better fits because you don't have to adapt the whole way across the program. And I'm not sure that there are those unicorns out there on a regular basis. I mean, again, if we go back to the list of the people who were hired when Napier was hired, I mean, would we have been happy if we had the results that Brian Kelly's got at LSU? We'd be sitting there going, like, he's too good to get rid of, but he's not good enough to want to keep. Lincoln Riley at USC, same way. Cristobal at Miami, same way. Venables, I'm not sure he's even going to survive this year. Freeman, I bet you there are some Notre Dame fans who are like, are we really disappointed if he leaves? Like, is that a terrible thing? And then Lanning, I think Oregon will pay whatever is necessary to keep him there because of what he's done, right? So out of those 7 guys, when you factor in Napier there, 1 guy's a sure thing. Two guys are sort of, and 4 of them, you're like, I'd do all right with somebody else. And, Florida, in many ways, because Napier was so unsuccessful on the field, gets to make that change sooner than some of those other programs because they're kind of in no man's land as opposed to having a definitive, this isn't good enough, time to try again.
Yeah, and look, I talked about where do you, as I said, last time you turned left and you got Napier, so a lot of people want to go take a right-hand turn and just go completely opposite. Well, that goes to the adapt or die part. We didn't see Billy Napier adapt very well here at Florida. It was, and granted, he came into a time at Florida where I don't know, he saw transfer portal, NIL, all that stuff happen. At Louisiana, I believe that stuff could work. I don't know if it could work in today's college football. You put Billy Napier back in Louisiana, I don't think he's having the same success that he did because you were able to roster build and develop at that level. If he develops at that level again at Louisiana, that guy's going somewhere else after his sophomore year. So I don't know if Billy Napier's built for this landscape of college football. He didn't adapt very well, whether it be roster construction, development, or his offensive style and play calling. He did not adapt with it. That's where I like your point, Will, and talking to specifically Lane Kiffin here, but for any coach, know what you're facing here at Florida. It is unique. You can recruit well enough where you don't have to live in the portal, but you better use the portal as a means to roster construct and make up for where there's going to be recruiting misses. So, okay, go backfill in the portal. Go get one or two difference makers in the portal. You can do that. You can do that here at Florida. You don't have to live in a portal like Ole Miss. You don't have to. And that's why I don't necessarily want to go the G5 route again. John Summerall's name at Tulane names, his name comes up a lot. I saw Dan Orlovsky put out a tweet of his list. His top of his list is Lane. Then he says Coach Prime, which I don't think Deion's probably coaching much longer. He's going through a lot off the field. And I'm not trying to make jokes here about, there seems to be something there about Deion Sanders where I don't know how much longer he's actually coaching. But no, by the way, he wouldn't be at the top of my list. Summerall is his 3rd. And then Golish is his 4th. You can't go that route again if you're Florida. You better be missing on some people before you even get there.
So again, I think it's a question of, do you care about optics or do you care about winning?
That's true.
And if you can get a guy like Summerall or Golish for $3 or $4 million a year, and then you can invest the extra 12 or 11 or 12 in front office recruiting, like people who are going to own that, then I think you can sell that to me, right? Where you go, look, we don't know whether we're going to hit on the head coach every time, but what we're going to do is we're going to hit on the front office.
There's no formula. There's no perfect formula out there. We've learned that.
Well, I think looking back, we can say that that Florida has been slow to adapt, right? The Dan Mullen hire was it's like there's a podcast I listen to talks about relationships, and the guy talks about when you have kids, he goes, the marriage you had is over. You don't get to go back to the marriage that you had. So stop thinking about that. And it's the really cool part is you get to design the marriage that you want. You get to co-create it with your spouse, but you have to factor in the fact that there are now little ones running all over the place. And I think the Dan Mullen hire was, hey, let's go back to that Urban Meyer thing. Mullen is not the maniacal, competitive person that Meyer was. And so it was run back the exact same thing, right? It's the same offense, which quite honestly is still pretty successful, but run back a lot of those things. And at the same time, well, Florida will recruit itself, which that wasn't going to work. You go back and look at even the Zook hire. That's one where it's like, from a PR perspective, that guy was such a goofball that, you could
I'll never understand.
You could use that to recruit against him. McElwain, I mean, just terrible on the recruiting trail. And terrible at judging offensive coordinators, because he had my favorite offensive coordinator of all time at Florida in Doug Nussmeier. Nick was texting me after the LSU loss yesterday. He's like, "Can you imagine like having to root for Garrett Nussmeier for LSU, and then you root for the New Orleans Saints, whose offensive coordinator, Doug Nussmeier?" Like, man, what a rough time.
They may end up hating that last name more than Florida fans.
I mean, so look, but I mean, I would have told you.
Hey, Jim McElwain, terrible fisherman too, by the way. I heard. So.
I mean, he doesn't like taking responsibilities for his fishing, that's for sure. So the one that I think is probably defensible is Will, like out of all of them, the one I thought would succeed was Will Muschamp. Like that was the one where I was just like, if he'd have gotten the right quarterback or the right offensive coordinator and everything had sort of been in place, because those defenses that McElwain took over with were just brutal. Like they were high level defenses, and unfortunately, then we were scoring 23 points a game because of McElwain and Nussmeier. But Muschamp was the guy who I think was on the cusp. And if you want to talk about patience, that's the one where I think if you had a strong front office to help that guy, like you might have been able to have more patience in terms of what was going on. Had one good year where Florida almost makes the playoff, a bunch of injuries in at least 1 year that really set them back. That's the one where I look at. But then again, you look at what he did at South Carolina and you're like, okay, like it's not like he was a difference maker at that position. So again, and what's McElwain done since? He hasn't been great at Central Michigan. You look at
that's where I got to go back to my.
It's not what do you do at Illinois?
Yeah, it's not a hiring. It's not a firing problem. It's a hiring problem. Like these guys have done nothing since then. Now Dan Mullen took a couple years off and did some ESPN stuff, and UNLV's doing pretty good. He got blasted by Boise State yesterday, but. Granted, it was not getting done at Florida. We know that. People can make all the excuses in the world they want. But Will Muschamp did nothing. And people was, Florida moves too fast. I'm sorry. Florida had patience with these guys. And there were some high moments for every one of these guys, but nothing sustainable, nothing long-lasting. And to me, you just dig in the grave even more. To me, I had no issues when Florida moved on from the coaches when they moved on from them.
Well, and here's where I sort of land on all this, right? You had Gene Stallings at Alabama, right? Wins a national championship, but still not quite to the Alabama standard that had been set before that. And then you got Mike DeBose, Dennis Franchione, Mike Shula, and then they had the guy who got caught at the strip club who, like,
we talked about
from Washington State. I can't remember his name, but he was in there too, right? So they went through their 4 jabronis before they got to Nick Saban. And so hopefully that's where we are when it comes to Florida, is you've had the Muschamp, the McElwain, and the Billy Napier experience. And now the question is, who are you going to bring in? Now, look, I mean, Alabama brought in Nick Saban, a guy who'd won a national championship at LSU, but he'd only won like 75% of his games at LSU. He'd only won 75% of his games at LSU. And he was not like, they were not putting up undefeated seasons at LSU, right? Like you had the Matt Mock championship, I think was with Les Miles afterwards, but those were kind of the teams that were sort of winning the national championships there at LSU. They were not the dominant things that we saw at Alabama. I can remember when he got brought back, like, has the game passed him by? He went to the pros, like he wasn't successful there, like all that sort of stuff. And immediately they're winning national championships in 2008 after he gets there. So maybe Kiffin is in that ilk, right? Kiffin's won 73% at Ole Miss. Saban wins 75 at LSU. Saban wins 88% of his games in Alabama. Can Kiffin make that jump up to 80? I think there's something to be said that potentially that's a possibility. But you just don't know, right? And so I think what you do is you do due diligence to make sure that you've got people who are willing to adapt, because college football is changing so quickly that you need people who are going to adapt. And to me, that's the place where Kiffin really does shine, is that he's shown a willingness and an ability to adapt. And then you factor in all the other stuff. I don't care that he's brash. I don't care that he talks crap and calls Kirby fat. That's kind of fun.
It's the icing on the cake if it works out.
I mean, again, it's the same thing. Spot the ball is awesome if Florida's 6-0 right now, right? We're all chanting around. You're printing shirts that say "Spot the Ball, Gators breakdown" underneath them.
No. I didn't do that one. I did not fall for that one.
No, I'm just saying, like if
Okay.
we're 6-0, you're getting those shirts made like right now, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Like you and a bunch of your ilk made a few bucks off of the scared money don't make money when everything got launched, right? So like the reality is that when there's hope that things are going to be good, like all that stuff is great.
Yeah,
but
Lanesville, it's already out there for everybody's got it right now.
But that all comes from being able to win. And so being able to win in college football right now means being able to adapt. And the cool part, and this is actually the best part for somebody like Kiffin, is if he goes 9-3 his first 2 seasons, like that was unacceptable for Mullen when he came in. Like that will be like, oh my God,
well,
like
we were
we're actually having
Mullen's
fun in
couple,
November.
but we were happy with Mullen's first 2 years.
Yeah. And then 2020 happened, and then 2021 happened. But I mean, I guess my point though is that there will be a grace period for whoever comes in this position that is different than the grace period that other guys have had before.
Happens
right?
every time.
Like there were people who wanted Zook fired about 2 games in. Yeah. There were people who wanted Muschamp fired definitely after year 2. There were people who wanted McElwain fired basically after the Michigan game to open the season. And there were guys who wanted Napier fired, and I was one of them after the A&M game last year. I think whoever comes in, and especially if it's Kiffin, who's got a pretty decent track record, I think those guys will have a little bit more rope, but not much.
Right.
Because it turns out that like nobody likes falling behind, and nobody likes shelling out $15 million to fall behind, right?
And when we've seen recently coaches come in and have instant success at lower programs.
Yeah. And a lot of the vitriol that has been aimed at Napier over the last year or so has been the buyout, has been the fact that you're getting paid this much, you shouldn't be this bad, right? That it's $7 or $8 million a year, like we should be getting some rate of return on the amount of money that you and your staff and the organization are getting. And Florida just hasn't gotten that rate of return.
Hey, Will, let's rapid fire through some of the super chats I got here. I want these guys certainly donated to the cause, so I want to go through them right quick. South Florida Don says cheers to bye Billy, and Don is a Gators Breakdown Plus member as well. I know, so thanks. Cheers for sure. I've already drank my Monster because I'm running on fumes right now, so I needed the Monster there. Junior says, thanks for going live, guys. Go Gators. Let's go Gators. And now here's to some comment or to some straight content here. Rapid fire, NIL/portal arrow equals John Gruden run the program like a semi-pro organization. Don't trust Kiffin, signed 51-year Gator. What has John Gruden done lately? No. Yeah.
Don't give him an email address.
That negative recruiting will certainly pick up, and whether it's true or not, negative recruiting is going to be out there.
I mean, he wrote the emails. It's just a question of did the NFL leak them intentionally? Like he wrote the emails. There's no.
Okay, great. And he won a Super Bowl 20 years ago. I mean, with Tony Dungy's players. I mean, come on, we can do better than that. MJ. Hey, Gator Dave, top 3 head coach list. Okay. We'll throw in your top 3 as well right here. Lane, Freeman, and I'm going college route, Will, so you can shun me for that if you want. Kiffin, Marcus Freeman. I'm a big Kenny Dillingham fan at Arizona State. So and look, last year was his first year there, and I remember when I first saw him, and I was like, it was only 1 year, and look, this is the second year, and look, results matter, of course. So there's not a big window there. So I would understand I am taking a huge risk. I don't know it's worth taking. But with Dillingham, I remember prepping for Florida, Mississippi State last year. And Arizona State had played Mississippi State already. And I was just watching. Look, comes from Oregon, of course, and he was there with Dan Lanning, and Will Stein is the OC now, and that would be a guy way down my list if I'm going coordinator route, by the way. But just sitting there watching those guys at Arizona State, I was like, hey, I like this Kenny Dillingham guy. And they kept winning and made the playoffs. There was a lot of notoriety around it. I've heard interviews with him. Had a quarterback injury this year, so they're kind of taking a step back. We got a big win yesterday over Texas Tech. So I'm a Dillingham guy. I mean, should he be third on my list? Probably not. I know people will throw James Franklin in there because he's got big game experience and maybe some other younger – And losing them. Yeah, that's true. Oh, my bad. Big school experience. Let me rephrase that.
I mean, I can lose to Ohio State and Michigan every year
that's
too.
True. That's true. That would be my top three, though. Lane, Freeman, Kenny Dillingham.
All right. My top three are Monken, Kiffin, and Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady.
Okay.
The guy who led the offense at LSU that was transformative with Joe Burrow at the helm and has gone to Buffalo, and they got rid of the former Miami quarterback who was with all those teams with Sean Taylor and stuff. What was his name?
What now?
The Miami quarterback who led him to a national championship.
Dorsey,
yeah. Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator there at Buffalo. The offense was terrible. Joe Brady took over, and all of a sudden, Josh Allen's an MVP candidate. Like, those would be my three. I am Lane or NFL.
Okay.
I don't think there's anybody at the college level who's worth the risk and worth the money you're going to have to spend.
Okay.
I would go, and if you can't get NFL, I go coordinator and cheap, and then figure out how to fill out my front office with guys who just like live, breathe, and will live and die recruiting.
My top coordinator would be Will Stein at Oregon. That'd be the route I would go there. Look, I agree. I lean guys who have head coaching experience. I don't know how imperative that is. Like we've seen recently. I just mentioned Kenny Dillingham being able to go from Oregon and have success at Arizona State. We saw it with Dan Lanning himself leaving Georgia to go to Oregon. Look, there's no right or wrong answer here. There's no for surefire way to know you're going to get the guy. I had no idea he'd go to Oregon and have the success he's had. Now, he's still a young coach. He's still got to go win some bigger games, but made the playoff last year. Really good there in the Big Ten there at Oregon. But certainly, when you look at what Dan Lanning's done at Oregon, nobody saw it. I didn't see that coming. Now, a lot of money being thrown that way in the new world of college football. But we just don't know how to gauge experience and how it's going to pay off. One more name, and I do think it's interesting. Of course, his name's going to get thrown around a lot more in Gator Nation because he can actually beat Miami. But one, Jeff Brom. Anthony Morrison says, just joined. What do you think about Jeff Brom as a replacement? Looking to his resume, very good. Love his offense. I do love his offense as well. I do think he's a really good play caller. He'd be on my list, and he probably would be in like the 5th, 6th, 7th range. Another name that's going to get thrown out there under Jed Fish name, of course, and they're at Washington, would just causes a little bit of a Florida connection down the list for me. To me, it's Lane, a little bit of a separation, Marcus Freeman, a little bit more of a separation in Dillingham, and then my first two are pretty close together. But then after that, and I don't know how attainable Marcus Freeman is. Notre Dame does, of course, private school, don't know contract details, how much Florida would be willing to pay or anything like that. But, hey, Jeff Brom would be a name I'd be interested in.
And he'd be one who, again, I don't think you'd have to throw the bank to get him to come. I think he would look at Florida as a significant step up from where he's at and would look at that as an opportunity to win a championship. And so, you're not going to have to give him the Kiffin money to get him to come, which frees you up to do other things elsewhere. So to me, this is all an arbitrage question. If you think Kiffin can do every job that you need in your front office when it comes to recruiting and PR and the head coach and the X's and O's and all that sort of stuff, if you're paying him $15 million or 13 or whatever it ends up being, you're paying him that money to do multiple jobs, right? If you hire a guy who's a coordinator, I think it's actually incumbent upon you to make him successful or somebody who's a coach at a lower level school. I think it's incumbent upon you to hire people around him to be able to make sure he's not trying to do 4 or 5 jobs, which quite honestly has been the reason we've all said, hire an offensive coordinator, Billy, obviously.
See, that's a good point when you bring up a coordinator though. I like Will Stein as an offensive coordinator at Oregon. Well, you know what? I don't want you as an offensive coordinator at Florida. I want you as a head coach at Florida. So that's another risk of hiring a coordinator because you don't want that guy necessarily calling the plays. So
let's just all put them in a race, and whoever kneecaps somebody Tanya Harding style is the one who's competitive enough that I want.
And I probably should rephrase that. I don't know if I don't want a head coach that does that calls plays, but you better be freaking elite at it. And Napier never was elite at it. Like I don't have a problem if the head coach wants to do it. But, man, going to your point earlier, Will, you better be a difference maker somewhere. And if you're a difference maker as a play caller, fine, continue doing it. Napier, I thought, was at least, since he did that, you should offer him the opportunity to see if it works. And then when it's apparent, adapt or die. And he didn't. He died. He didn't adapt. So that's where I don't care if you want to call your own. Just if it doesn't work, just don't be so slow to change from it. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the issue there. One more as we kind of go all in on Kiffin or Brent Key. I mean, you start throwing in Jeff Brom, you start throwing in Brent Key. Guys are out there alma maters as head coaches. So, and Dillingham from the Arizona area grew up there too. So these guys might be hard pulls just in general. I'm just kind of talking a little bit of wish list here as well. There's some work to be involved there. Brent Key, look, a lot, very margin for error at Georgia Tech. He wins. Don't get me wrong. Very thin margin for error. A lot of ways what we see with Billy Napier, but he does win a lot of these games, beats ranked teams for one thing. He can actually beat some ranked teams, but that's the ACC. It's a little bit different. He's not playing many SEC ranked teams, but okay, I'll still give him some credit there. I like Brent Key as an option if you miss on some guys. Now, Buster Faulkner is the OC there, and a lot of people will still sit and throw Haynes King against Brent Key he's not good enough, or they rely too much on him. Well, my thing is they're winning games. Buster Faulkner, if you go and look at his resume, has been a pretty good coordinator for passing offenses in the past. Now, the worry there would be that, to me, that's proven Key can hire a good OC, and then that OC can adapt to get wins out of his quarterback. But if Brent Key was to, say, leave Georgia Tech, get the Florida job, Faulkner might be the guy elevated to get the Georgia Tech job after him. So, me, a big pull for Brent Key would be getting an OC like Faulkner. But I don't know if he comes with him or not. Credit for getting a guy and hiring a guy like that. But I'd have to see more from Brent Key to know that he would adapt with his quarterback. I think he has adapted to Haynes King and getting the most out of him and winning games with him. But will you be willing to change the style of play? You cannot play that. You cannot play that short margin, little margin for error, ground and pound football at Florida. I am definitely done with that style. Key's very interesting to me, but to me, I got to see more before I would just fully buy into that one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're getting down the line. We're getting
Correct.
down the list when you start talking about this sort of stuff. And I think it's fine to think about Clark Lee and Brent Key, but I think questions there. I think the floor question that is not even in question when it comes to somebody like Lane Kiffin is not necessarily answered for guys like Key and Clark Lee, right? I think I can imagine a scenario where those guys might struggle to adapt and the floor would fall out. And we've seen that with Mullen recently. We've seen that with certainly Muschamp. We saw that with McElwain, and we've seen it with Napier now too. So in many ways, there's value in just establishing that floor. I think Key maybe more than Lee suggests that he'd be able to establish that floor. But like I said, my top candidate isn't a college guy anyway. So.
Kind of stuff we talked about earlier, but I'll go into it. These guys did some super chats here. Jason Yulee, can't believe anyone would want to hire Kiffin. He's been to 4P4 programs, has won nothing. We hit on that a little bit. Anthony Morrison wanted to know if we did read super chats. That's what we do here. Big no for me on this one. Hey guys, what about Ed Orgeron for head coach? No. Defensive line coach? Sure.
I would love him to be on the staff.
Yes.
I think if you bring in Orgeron for the staff, that's a big win. I think Orgeron as a head coach, I think he's underrated as a head coach, to be honest with you. He went something like 40-9 or something in his first 4 years at LSU, wins the national championship with a team of talent that he amassed a couple of top 5 recruiting classes. So I would talk myself into it, but it would take a really long time for me to talk myself into it. But if you had him in as the defensive coordinator, defensive line coach, and he wants to get back in, I think that's a huge win because he is plus, if we ever decide we have to go through this again, he's a great interim. He's done it a bunch of times.
Last one here. Thanks for the super chat, guys. Drinkwitz adapted, hired an OC, gave up play calling for sure, and made their offense better. Hired Kirby Moore as the OC. I think he's made good coordinator hires because you throw in Blake Baker, who is the LSU defensive coordinator. That is one plus about Drinkwitz. I think he's hired some good coordinators, and I think that's very of course, very important in today's college football, and shows the willingness to adapt. Hey, maybe I do not need to be the head coach calling plays. Let me go get a guy, and their offense has been much better because of it. So
I don't have any good reasons to say no to Drinkwitz. Like when I look at his resume, when I look at what he's done, when I look
but I'm going to throw
his
it out there
ability
with
to adapt.
What has he won? What has he done?
Well, I mean, he won some stuff at Appalachian State, and then he also, though I think he was only head coach there for a year, and then he has turned Missouri into a pretty consistent competitor. Again, I think if I look at his resume, I could find a lot of good and probably should have him on the list. I just don't like the man. And that goes a long way towards me wanting to have him as the head coach of Florida. Like, I find Kiffin's barbs to be witty and amusing. I find Drinkwitz's barbs to be like the guy who got swirlies when he was a kid and just lame and annoying. And so I just don't want him to be the head coach. I don't have a great rationale for it. Normally, I'm pretty statistically inclined, but much like I have ragged on the LSU quarterback all year long for reasons that have nothing to do with his actual play on the field, even though that hasn't been great. This is just one where I would immediately like be putting on the no ma'am shirt from Married with Children and like, nope, like I'm against this. Like we're going to say it up front just because I don't like him.
Yeah. You're not alone in that. You're not alone in that. I think a lot of people. Hey, look. Last thing we'll say, and we're going to sign off for this episode. We got plenty of weeks to talk about this. One aspect of this, and I know as I said, he is polarizing. There's going to be so many people against it but there's going to be many more people for it. I think the only two that you bring in right away that gets Florida Victorious excited and new members of Florida Victorious. That's Lane Kiffin and Marcus Freeman. That's to me, that's the two that get sold right away, where you don't have to really sell. Florida doesn't have to do much selling except make the announcement. Like, because believe me, I know people. Hey, I've quit donating to Florida Victorious. I'm not donating to Florida Victorious anymore. But if they hire Lane Kiffin, I'm back on board, and I'll even double it. I've had plenty of those conversations. So I think that's one reason he's so polarizing. Because there is a lot of the fan base that doesn't make everybody right. I completely understand that. But I think if you want the best start possible from a fan base perspective, from a support perspective, Lane Kiffin's the guy. Marcus Freeman would not be far behind that. I think that would be just the general excitement level for Gator Nation. It would rise so much with just one of those two guys.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think, Lane's put in the PR time to be able to have that just this year on Twitter. I don't think it's a coincidence that there was like that ESPN documentary, quasi documentary, like basically like rehabbing his image. It's like, what do we need to rehab here? Like, like we all know he's a brash guy who's won a few games. And, so you do wonder whether that was sort of put there as a like, hey, like, I feel the clock running down here at Ole Miss and want to make sure I end up exactly where I need to end up. He's made some comments about the Ole Miss student section not showing up and all that sort of stuff too, right? That has given Florida fans hope. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Is that when Lane Kiffin comes in, the path to a national championship is visible. Like there is a vision when you immediately hire that guy. And it's the same thing with Marcus Freeman. When you hire that guy, the path to a national championship is visible. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it means everybody can envision that that's on the horizon. And, it was sort of the same thing when Urban Meyer was brought in. There were certainly questions, but there was a path to a championship that was visible. And I think, honestly, the guys we brought in since then, like I said, Muschamp's the only guy that I looked at and said, okay, the path is clearly visible in terms of where this is going to go. And it went obviously very poorly, but that to me is what you're talking about. So yeah, that is a challenge with what I'm suggesting, where you go and get somebody from the NFL, because you bring in a Monken or you bring in a Joe Brady, or bring in somebody else from the NFL, and you have some PR work to do. Right. You have to convince people, you have to set a vision. But let's be honest, the job of a head coach of a college football team is to constantly be casting vision. It's to constantly be convincing players that this is where they want to be. It's constantly convincing fans this is where they need to put their money. It's constantly convincing the administration that they need to support you in every single way financially. It's convincing the academic folks that let's overlook that grade over here because he's a really good middle linebacker. Like there's all that stuff that gets rolled up into what a head coach needs to do. And if I were to look, I talked about adapt or die being like the number one thing for people. I would say the number two thing for a head coach is, are they able to cast vision? Like, can they cast the vision and get everybody to go behind him, right? The problem with Napier is after about 3 weeks, he had people with pitchforks running at him. And, so it's not even just a matter of like making sure that you're not getting pitchforks thrown at you, though. It's also making sure everyone's rowing in the same direction of the boat. And I think to your point, like you hire Kiffin and everybody's rowing with you for the first year and a half, but that first loss, against a top 10 team, when all of a sudden somebody flashes up the record against top 10 opponents at Ole Miss and all that sort of stuff, the pitchforks come out. And so you also need someone who's going to be able to adapt and withstand the scrutiny that comes with that. And that'll be the question with Kiffin is when the rubber meets the road, like when he's in Jacksonville or when he's in Athens or when he's in Gainesville, when those games are moved for the cocktail party in Jacksonville, like when those games are going on, like
Tampa and Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Wherever the hell it's going to be. When it comes time, when the rubber meets the road for Georgia, Florida State, LSU, Tennessee, all the rivals and whoever ends up being rivals in this new look SEC, like that's going to be a guy who's going to have to deliver. Like Urban Meyer won all those games. Like when he walked into the SEC championship, when he walked into the national championship, even after the Ginn return for the touchdown against Ohio State, like I still thought he was going to get it done. I just looked at it and I said, that guy has something about him that he's going to get it done. How do you, so I'm less concerned with everybody rowing in the same direction day one and much more concerned with whether the guy can keep them rowing in the same direction year 2, year 3, year 4. Because what happened was about halfway into each of these last 4 guys' tenures, the fan bases started rowing in the opposite direction. And the minute that starts happening, then you have to overcome the momentum from your own space, right? Like the negative recruiting that comes from your own space and, sort of schmucks like me questioning you and what you're doing in your own space. And so, that to me, it's 2 years from now before we know whether they've made the right hire, but we'll know 2 years from now, right? We'll be able to come on here and go, yeah, I told you Kiffin was the right guy, or, I told you they should have hired that guy over there, when Golish is going like, 42-6 at Auburn or whatever ends up happening. Cause that's the way it is. It's sort of luck of the draw, right? Like sometimes like you don't know until you bring them in and you go, oh, we should have known. But no matter what I do, when I go back and I look at the statistics of these guys who get brought in, it's really hard to suss out whether somebody's going to be good or not. And so, hopefully Florida gets it done this time.
Yep. All right. Good stuff, Will. I wasn't sure we planned on being on for an hour and 40 minutes, but hey, big news calls for a big episode. So that's just where it goes. Lots of angles to this, having to look back at Billy Napier a bit and look forward at the same time here for the Gators. So Will and I will not get to, Will's going to have tomorrow night off. We're not doing our Monday episode. I will be having a Gators Breakdown Plus chat. That will be kind of pre-recorded. I'll release that sometime on Monday. If you're a Gators Breakdown Plus member, you'll be able to have that in your podcast feed too with this episode. So there'll be plenty of stuff to talk about. But who knows? I might be live back on Monday night by myself or something like that. Who knows? But we'll switch in Monday and Sunday here for this big news of Billy Napier being fired as University of Florida head coach. And what's on the horizon. So, Will, thanks for adjusting the schedule today, man. Big news day. And, hey, man, it's going to be a different feel for the next few weeks, but we'll have Gator Nation covered throughout.
Yeah, at least it's not the same thing where it's like, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And it's the same discussion point week after week after week, right? Like, we can actually start talking about football now.
Yeah.
Right. We can go back and look at what are the changes for DJ Lagway? What are the changes on the defensive side of the ball? What are the changes on the offensive play calling? Why do we not waste timeouts anymore? Like all of those things are things that we can look at and analyze. And there's going to be there's a difference, which means we can look at that and actually talk about football again. I looked at yesterday and I just sort of laughed and I went, yeah, this is like a culmination of everything that I've come to loathe and also appreciate about the Billy Napier era. Guys are playing hard, but it doesn't seem to turn into anything. And, So we'll see. We got the whole rest of the season, man. We only get 12 or 13 of these. So hopefully boys can turn it around and Billy Gonzalez can turn it around and we can have a bowl game to be looking forward to by the end of the year.
For sure. So, all right, everybody, that'll do it for this episode of Gators Breakdown. That is Will Miles. I am David Waters. Guys and girls out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Gators Breakdown.